This is the story of Arata, who was quite happy with his life and spent every day trying to win over his crush, Shibobu. But one day, suddenly, Earth was attacked by aliens. Arata turned out to be the only person who could battle the aliens and free the Earth from their invasion. Fulfilling everyone's hopes, he successfully liberates Earth, but in exchange, he ends up having to marry a female alien. Now, Arata, who constantly flirts with girls, finds it difficult to live with an alien. Watch today's series. The story begins in a normal human world where an alien invasion happens unexpectedly. Meanwhile, a fortune teller senses the approaching danger but then catches sight of a boy named Arata. He notices how Arata is trying to impress a girl named Shinobu, but she is ignoring him and walking away. Shinobu had actually become frustrated with Arata because he would often lose interest in her and flirt with other girls. Arata denies this, but when a girl passes by, he can't help but be happy just looking at her. Eventually, Shinobu gets angry and leaves him. At this point, the fortune teller rushes toward Arata, thinking he is about to commit suicide, but instead he pushes him into a river and starts praying for his death. The thing is, Arata was still alive, and after getting out of the water, he started to teach the fortune teller a lesson. In the midst of this, the fortune teller looked closely at Arata's face and told him how his face hinted at an impending disaster that was going to happen soon. Arata was about to ignore it, but right then, his mother and Shinobu showed up. They were about to tell him something important. Before they could say anything, a large crowd gathered around and seated him in front of an alien. During this time, the alien revealed that they had taken control of Earth, but they decided to give a random human a chance to save the planet by playing a game with them. For this task, the aliens randomly chose Arata. Initially, he refused, but then the alien he was going to face showed up. He was stunned to see that the alien was actually a girl named Lum, and after noticing her attractive figure, Arata agreed to the challenge. And so the day arrived when Arata and Lum's competition was about to begin. According to the rules, Arata would have 10 days to win the game, during which he had to touch Lum's head. If he succeeded, the aliens would leave Earth and go back to their planet. Finally, the competition begins and the entire world has its eyes on Arata. But as soon as he runs to touch Lum's head, she starts flying in the air. Seeing her fly, Arata is completely shocked, and for the next 4 days, all he can do is chase her without even getting close. In the end, Arata gathers all his strength and starts running with full determination to touch Lum, but the next 5 days pass in a similar manner. This means he only has 1 day left, and by this time, everyone has lost hope in him. That night, Arata decides to just sleep at home. Meanwhile, his parents were disappointed by their son's failure. Even Shinobu and his other friends were upset with Arata. But then, Shinobu took a step that changed everything. Shinobu decided that if Arata won the match, she would marry him. Hearing this, a wave of excitement rushed through Arata, and he decided that after winning this match, he would marry Shinobu. Thus, the final day arrived, and Arata started the game with full energy. At first, Lum successfully evaded him, but when she saw how fired up Arata became after hearing the word marriage, she herself got distracted. Taking advantage of this, Arata quickly pulled off Lum, causing her to become embarrassed and try to cover herself out of shame. While Lum was struggling, Arata took advantage of the situation and grabbed her, thus winning the match. After this moment, the people of Earth were freed from the aliens' control and happiness spread everywhere. Meanwhile, as Arata was being honored, he was celebrating his upcoming wedding. But just then, Lum stepped forward and agreed to marry him herself. At that moment, Arata couldn't understand anything, but Shinobu saw them together and stormed off angrily. On the other hand, even though Arata didn't want to, he ended up getting into a relationship with Lum. Later, when he tried to talk to Shinobu at home, Lum showed up, saying she was there to stay with him for the rest of their lives. Despite everything, Arata didn't want to forget about Shinobu, so he immediately told Lum about her. Hearing this, Lum got extremely angry and using her electric shock, injured him and left. No matter what, Arata had gotten another chance to talk to Shinobu, so he started calling her. During the call, he was about to confess his love to her when Lum interfered once again, interrupting their conversation. Shinobu, furious once more, hung up the phone. We see how Lum took control of the satellite and was monitoring Arata's calls to ensure he couldn't do anything behind her back. Later, when Arata called Shinobu again, he explained everything to her, telling her how Lum was eavesdropping, but instead of reacting, they should just ignore her. Because of this, Lum's presence was completely disregarded, which made her extremely angry, and she attacked Arata with an electric shock. In the midst of this, Arata decided that no matter what, he would find a way to meet Shinobu. Despite Lum's attacks, he set out to meet her, and the two managed to see each other. This made Lum furious, and she immediately launched an attack on both of them. While everyone was distracted, she clung to Arata's neck. At that moment, Shinobu saw them together and once again stormed off angrily. The next day, Arata was at school where everyone looked at him with resentment. In the middle of class, Lom was treating him like her husband and the other students didn't like it at all. Even the class teacher was upset with his behavior, but Shinobu was the most heartbroken because she felt Arata had left her for an alien. In the heat of the moment, Shinobu attacked him, causing serious injuries. Sometime later, when Arata is at home, he repeatedly has to endure Lum's shocks. Finally frustrated, he decides to run away from home. While eating at a restaurant, he sees on TV that Lum, along with his entire family, is searching for him. During the broadcast, the news anchor reveals his face, forcing Arata to flee once again. In the process, he accidentally bumps into a girl named Sakura. Sakura becomes quite distressed from the collision and starts to struggle for breath. Seeing this, Arata tries to take advantage of the situation, as Sakura was extremely beautiful, so he attempts to get closer to her. However, as Arata approaches, Sakura loses her composure and pushes him away. In a nearby park, she explains how she usually keeps her distance from boys due to a curse placed on her. In fact, when Arata gets closer, he feels a strong sense of bad luck radiating from her body. Because of this, Sakura asks him to accompany her so that she can perform an exorcism to remove her curse. Arata, unable to refuse a girl's request, agrees to go with her. A while later, Sakura brings him to her house, where Arata notices a person who looks exactly like the fortune teller. He immediately tries to run away, but it turns out to be the fortune teller's mother, who, upon Sakura's request, kidnaps Arata. In the end, Arata finds himself trapped and unable to escape. During this time, Sakura, now fed up with her curse, begins performing the exorcism on him. While working for a long time, Sakura starts experiencing pain and despite her efforts is unable to complete the exorcism. In the meantime, the demon begins emerging from her body and moves toward Arata. Finally, Sakura resumes the exorcism, and every second becomes extremely difficult for Arata. During this time, Sakura realizes that she has freed herself from the demons and curses, so with renewed energy, she completely eradicates the demon from Arata. After a while, just as Arata feels he's safe, the fortune teller's grandmother suddenly attacks him, leaving him injured. A short time later, Arata's condition worsens, and he has to be taken to the hospital. There, Lum and Arata's family members think that he's on the verge of dying, so they start praying for him. But just then, when a nurse comes in, Arata wakes up and starts asking for a phone number. Seeing this behavior, everyone is shocked and even Shinobu gets angry and leaves. Meanwhile, Lum begins shocking him as a lesson. Lum's behavior continues for days, leaving Arata completely frustrated. Finally, he goes to a fortune teller, asking for a way to protect himself from Lum. Before the fortune teller can even say anything, Lum shows up and starts shocking Arata again for his actions. The next day, Arata's friend visits his house. Even though Arata doesn't want to meet him, he can't bring himself to ignore him. His friend then hands him a box given to him by the fortune teller. When Arata opens the box, he finds a ribbon inside that can suppress Lum's powers. Just then, Lum shows up and notices the ribbon. Seeing the opportunity, Arata quickly puts the ribbon on Lum. Surprisingly, Lum happily wears it, but as she tries to leave, she finds it difficult to fly or use her shock powers. At that moment, a boy appears in front of Lum and seeing her struggling, tries to comfort her. Lum grabs his hand to test her powers, but after holding her hand, the boy decides he wants to marry her. Meanwhile, Arata and his friend arrive, and his friend tries to explain to the boy that he can never win Lum's heart. However, the moment Lum touches his hand, even he falls for her. The thing is, Lum didn't care about either of them and instead went to Arata, telling him about losing her powers. Later, when Lum and Arata return to his house, Arata is happy because now he doesn't have to deal with Lum's shocks anymore. Lum too considered the ribbon a sign of love and didn't want to remove it. In a way, Arata's luck had finally turned and he was very happy about it. It was nighttime and Arata and Lum were supposed to spend the night alone. However, that random guy and Arata's friend weren't willing to leave Lum alone with Arata. But Lum pushed both of them out of the room and then tried to get closer to Arata. Meanwhile, those two boys, hearing noises from inside, burst into Lum's room only to see them in a compromising position, leading to a major misunderstanding. During this chaos, Arata's friend noticed the letter written by the fortune teller. After reading it, he realized that Lum had lost her powers because of the ribbon. Lum overheard this and, in a fit of rage, ripped off the ribbon and started shocking Arata again. The next day, a new character named Mendo is introduced. He bids goodbye to his grandfather and sets off for his first day of school. To welcome him, a helicopter was already waiting, and he jumped down from it using a parachute. On the other side at school, Shinobu had grown tired of Arata and wanting to put an end to everything, attacked him with a desk. The desk flew out of the window, and just then, a parachute landed outside. Everyone ran to see it, and that's when they saw Mendo standing there. Mendo was the new transfer student at the school, and every girl instantly became infatuated with him. Even Shinobu stepped forward and started apologizing for throwing the desk at him. But just then, Mendo took her hands and began to flirt with her. Seeing this, Shinobu completely fell for him, which didn't sit well with Arata, leading to a fight between the two. A little while later, Arata was shocked to see that Shinobu could only think about Mendo, and because of this, he started gnawing on the bench out of frustration. At that moment, Mendo walked over and started talking to Shinobu. Just as Arata tried to intervene, Lum showed up, and at first glance, Mendo became smitten with her. He immediately tried to woo her, but Lum rejected him, stating that Arata was her husband. This comment hit Mendo hard because in his eyes, Arata had no qualities that could win over Lum. A short time later, it was time to elect the class president, and everyone nominated Mendo. However, during his speech, Mendo declared that he would ban all boys from looking at other girls or engaging in any inappropriate behavior. This statement turned all the boys against him. Now, every boy's hope was on Arata, the only one who would stand up to Mendo and bring justice for them all. In the end, Arata steps forward and delivers a speech in favor of the boys, which turns the competition into a fierce battle. On one side were the girls supporting Mendo, and on the other side were all the boys rallying behind Arata. Finally, a vote takes place, resulting in a tie, which leads to a final match to decide the winner who would become the class president. Mendo decides to use his family's traditional game. According to the rules, he has to continuously touch Arata's body with his gloves. If he fails to do so, Arata will win. Mendo starts throwing the gloves one by one, but Arata keeps dodging them. Eventually, Arata, while trying to escape, ends up on the rooftop. At this point, Mendo has him surrounded and prepares to throw his final glove. But just then, Lum shows up and intercepts the glove. Shigem goes a step further and attacks Mendo with her thunder, injuring him. At that moment, everyone gathers around and declares Arata the winner. During this, Mendo realizes he has lost the match and decides to end his life. However, the next day arrives and Mendo's mind is still filled with thoughts of Lum. He is determined to make her his no matter what. While arriving at school using his parachute, Lum accidentally bumps into him and Mendo takes the situation. Lum was puzzled about where Arata had disappeared. In reality, Arata was off to the side, talking to Shinobu, trying to confess his feelings. However, he was shocked to find out that Shinobu no longer had feelings for him and had fallen for Mendo instead. She ended up dumping Arata. A short while later, the entire school went on a picnic, and both Arata and Lum were part of the group. During the outing, Mendo approached Lum and invited her to explore a cave with him. Lum agreed, but she was also planning to take Arata along. Arata, seeing this as an opportunity, quickly agreed since he knew Shinobu would also join if Mendo was around. After some time, the group entered the cave and both boys were plotting their own plans. A little later, Mendo intentionally turned off the flashlight and tried to use the opportunity to get closer to Lum. On the other hand, Arata was trying to move closer to Shinobu. But when the light turned back on, their plans were ruined because both had mistakenly grabbed the wrong girls. Frustrated, the two boys decided to stick together and avoid further mistakes. A little deeper into the cave, Mendo turned off the light once more. But when the light came back on, he found himself standing next to Arata instead of Lum. Seeing this, both of them realized just how terrible their luck really was. Due to the increasing darkness, Mendo starts getting scared and behaves like a frightened child. Arata, seeing this, is shocked at how someone who was standing like a hero just moments ago has now turned into a scaredy cat. Mendo then reveals that if he's with a girl, he feels no fear at all. This fact is confirmed when the two girls show up and Arata covers their eyes in front of Mendo. Immediately, Mendo starts crying like a baby, but as soon as Arata removes his hands, Mendo becomes completely normal again. After that, they all continue moving forward, but this time Mendo's flashlight actually turns off, causing panic among the group. Somehow, they manage to reach a corner where they accidentally activate an alien ship that, upon taking off, flies out of the cave and leaves Earth altogether. With this, they finally manage to escape the cave. In the next scene, we see all four of them playing tennis, where one of the balls flies into the air and lands on an alien. These aliens were carrying a box, but as soon as the ball hit them, their boss, along with the box, fell near the group. Arata's attention immediately goes to the box and he rushes toward it. When Mendo sees that there is a girl inside the box, he too loses his composure and becomes mesmerized. Meanwhile, the other aliens arrive and are thrilled to see such a handsome guy like Mendo. Their boss, who was knocked out, finally wakes up, and the aliens excitedly inform him that they found a suitable boy for their princess. The elder boss is pleased to hear this and tells Mendo that if he kisses the princess right away, he will get the chance to marry her and spend the night together. Hearing this, Mendo becomes overjoyed and immediately rushes to kiss her, but Arata is also eager to do the same. Just as Arata is about to kiss the princess, Lum intervenes and stops him, allowing Mendo to proceed instead. However, the same thing happens to Mendo when Shinobu steps in and prevents him from kissing the princess. In the end, with no other option, Arata manages to free himself from Lum's grip and successfully kisses the princess. When the princess opens her eyes, she mistakenly thinks that Mendo is the one who kissed her and is overjoyed to see such a handsome guy. A little while later, the aliens hold a meeting with Lum present as well. Lum is there because she refuses to let her husband be taken away by the princess under any circumstances. The aliens agree with her, acknowledging that the princess doesn't know the truth, so they decide to make Mendo the prince instead. The elder was unhappy with their decision because it went against their traditions, but the other aliens didn't seem to understand his concern. Meanwhile, in class, Mendo and Arata were supposed to teach all the students about discipline, but everyone was surprised, thinking that if it was about discipline, they should focus more on themselves. During this time, Mendo was feeling down, thinking that if he had kissed the princess first, his luck would have been completely different. Just then, the princess suddenly crashes through the window. She approaches Mendo and starts calling him her husband, which makes all the other girls in the class very upset. At this point, Mendo was completely confused. Even when Arata tried to get close to the princess, she pushed him away forcefully. When Arata was about to tell her about the kiss, the aliens covered his mouth and silenced him. During this, the aliens took Mendo aside and explained how they had chosen him for the princess, and now he had to support them. Mendo, seeing no other option, agreed. A little while later, when Shinobu was about to tell the princess the truth about the kiss, the aliens quickly silenced her and threw her aside too. Finally, the princess decided that she would personally prepare a love beat and get closer to Mendo. Even Lum offered to help her with this plan. After a while, when Mendo saw how quickly the princess had found a way to stay close to him, he tried to run away out of fear. However, the princess forcefully grabbed him and took him along with her. In the next moment, they were already quite close to each other, but their moment was ruined by Arata's sudden arrival. At the same time, the elder, who had been captured by the other aliens to prevent him from revealing the truth to the princess, arrived. Now that he was completely free, he told the princess that it wasn't Mendo who kissed her, but Arata. Hearing this, the princess was utterly shocked and didn't know what to do. Her heart was still drawn to Mendo, and she didn't like Arata at all. However, the elder warned her that if she went against the rules, it could have serious consequences for her. Finally, the princess asked the elder what kind of punishment she would face if she disobeyed. After a long pause, the elder admitted that he didn't know because these rules were established by their ancestors. To get to the root of the issue, the princess and the elder decided to consult their previous elders for guidance. When they did this, they were shocked to find out that even the former elder had no idea. One by one, the current elder tried to gather information from all the past elders, but none of them knew the answer. In the end, the elder decided that only one person could answer this question, the very first elder. So they asked the first elder, who revealed that in his youth, he was fond of adventure. During one of his daring escapades, he came across a sleeping girl. He impulsively kissed her, claiming her as his own, and they eventually got married. It turned out that this entire rule was established just to ensure that the first elder would never forget his first love. After learning the truth, all the students at school left, disappointed. The princess, too, realized that the tradition she had been living by all her life actually had no real meaning. This revelation shattered her completely. During this time, Mendo tried to comfort the princess, telling her that instead of focusing on tradition, she should care more about having a handsome husband. In a way, he was trying to get closer to her. But just then, Arata showed up and shoved Mendo aside. Now left in the darkness, Mendo began panicking and started screaming like a child. Seeing this, the princess understood that Mendo wasn't the right choice for her either and decided to ignore him and set out to find a strong man for herself. The next day, Arata was on his way to school when he heard from some friends that a new nurse had joined their school. Upon hearing about the nurse, he immediately rushed to the school, where he saw that the new nurse was none other than Sakura. When Sakura noticed Arata, she recognized him instantly. Meanwhile, Mendo, who was in the middle of trying to propose to the nurse, was stunned to see them already knowing each other. Arata then explained everything, revealing that Sakura was not just a nurse but also an exorcist. When all the boys heard this, they tried to get closer to Sakura, but she quickly pushed them away and threw them out. Around this time, several teachers arrived holding a pair of gloves. They had come to seek Sakura's help in removing the curse from the gloves. Before anyone could react, the fortune teller made an entrance in his car and accidentally took one of the gloves with him. Meanwhile, as Lum was arriving at the school, the glove fell into her hands. Since Lum didn't know anything about it, she asked Arata what it was. Arata then started explaining that it was a pair of boxing gloves, and he even put them on. But this turned out to be his biggest mistake, as the gloves contained the soul of a lover who began forcing Arata to get close to other girls against his will. At first, Arata had no idea what was happening to him. Just then, Mendo stepped forward, trying to help him, but he ended up getting too close to Arata himself. Seeing this, Mendo angrily pushed Arata away from him. As this chaos was unfolding, Sakura and the other teachers arrived and revealed to everyone that none of this was Arata's fault. It was all due to the cursed gloves. After this, they shared the details about the curse, which turned out to be true because despite his efforts, Arata couldn't take the gloves off. At that moment, one of the teachers came forward with another glove and warned everyone that this one was even more dangerous than the first. Without hesitation, the teacher put the second glove on Arata's hand. Just then, the principal entered the room, and the second glove suddenly flew off and hit the principal, injuring him badly. A little while later, Sakura revealed the whole story. The gloves once belonged to a boxer who considered himself very introverted. One of the gloves had the tendency to try and socialize with people, while the other believed in hitting and causing harm. Meanwhile, when Lum got close to Arata, he was about to punch her, but instead he controlled himself and ended up punching himself. Everyone was shocked to see this, and Lum was deeply impressed by his actions. As Mendo approached to cheer him on, Arata punched him and sent him flying, which started a fight between the two. During the fight, as Lum tried to approach him, Arata did everything he could to protect her from his punches. Just then, Sakura came up with an idea and put both of them in a boxing ring. Arata, trying to avoid hitting Lum, kept punching himself repeatedly until he was completely injured. At that point, Sakura stepped in and removed the cursed gloves from him. The next day, Arata and Lum were walking to school together when Lum noticed a couple holding hands and chatting happily. Inspired, Lum tried to hold Arata's hand in the same way, but before she could, Arata quickly ran off to Shinobu and started flirting with her again. The thing is, Shinobu didn't pay any attention to him at all. Meanwhile, we see Mendo, who is receiving love letters one after another from all the girls, and he graciously thanks each one of them. On the other hand, all the boys were furious at his behavior and wanted to teach him a lesson at any cost. That's when they came up with an idea to put one fool against another fool, and that fool was none other than Arata. A little while later, the boys in the class gathered together and wrote a fake love letter pretending to be a girl and handed it over to Arata. Arata, excited to receive his first love letter, started reading it out loud in front of everyone. But as he read it, he realized that instead of a love confession, it was more of an insult directed at Mendo. So he began reading it even louder, which caught Mendo's attention. This led to an argument between the two. However, Mendo didn't seem too bothered because according to him, while Arata got one letter, he had already received many. Just then, Lum arrived. When she found out that Arata had received a letter from a girl, she got really angry. To make him jealous, she moved closer to Mendo, trying to show Arata, but no matter what she did, it didn't affect him at all. Seeing Lum close to him made Mendo very happy, and he took the opportunity to reveal to her how Arata was getting so excited over a fake letter. Arata didn't like this at all, and it led to another argument between them. In the end, it was decided that if Arata wanted to prove himself, he would have to go on a date with the girl who wrote the letter. Meanwhile, the boys who had written the letter started worrying about what they should do next. Eventually, one of the boys came up with an idea and approached another girl, asking her to play along and pretend to be the letter's author. She agreed to help them out. The next day, the boys informed Arata about the girl who had planned to meet him after school. In the end, Mendo and the others decided to accompany Arata after school to uncover the truth. But when school ended, an unexpected problem arose. The girl's stomach got upset due to overeating, so she couldn't make it. Now the boys were stressed, wondering how they would break the news to Arata. Meanwhile, Lum, who was already upset by the whole situation, overheard their conversation and realized how these boys had set everything up. After school, Mendo, Arata, and the boys waited for the girl at a restaurant, but she didn't show up for a long time. As more time passed, Lum started to feel bad, thinking that if the girl didn't show up, Arata would end up being humiliated. So she decided to come up with a plan. Meanwhile, Mendo gave Arata a little more time to prove himself. Just as things seemed tense, a girl walked into the restaurant and sat down beside Arata. Everyone was stunned to see the girl in front of them. Even Arata, after taking a closer look, understood everything. Lum quietly explained the whole situation to him, suggesting that he should play along to save his dignity. Arata did exactly as she advised, and they all left the restaurant together. While walking back for the first time, Arata held Lum's hand, making it clear that somewhere deep down he had started to develop feelings for her. The next day after finishing school, Arata went straight home because today his favorite snack was being prepared. As soon as he entered his room, he was surprised to see Lum already there, all dressed up. He couldn't understand why she was so dressed up, but then Lum explained that she had opened an interdimensional portal that would allow them to travel to her planet, where the annual match competition was taking place. Although Arata refused to go with her, Lum forcefully dragged him through the portal. When Arata arrived and saw a huge crowd, all seemingly ready to fight, he thought it was going to be the last day of his life. But he was wrong. Rather than fighting, everyone was playing a game where both teams had to collect as many balls as possible. Meanwhile, Lum was busy collecting balls for her team and asked Arata to help her out as well. However, Arata noticed a girl on the opposing team and instantly found her attractive. Without a second thought, he went straight over to her and started chatting. Lum quickly tried to stop him, explaining that the girl's name was Benton and she was her childhood friend. Meanwhile, on Earth, Arata's parents began to worry, wondering why their son hadn't come home for his favorite snack for the first time ever. They started suspecting that something might have happened to him. At that moment, the fortune teller arrived and revealed that their son was trapped in hell and it would be nearly impossible for him to return. The fortune teller offered to help them, but in exchange, asked them to treat him to a meal. Back in the game, Lum's team was on the verge of winning. But then Benton used her charm to seduce Arata, trying to get him to kiss her. He was just about to fall for it when Lum spotted him, becoming extremely furious. Due to her rage, Benton's team managed to win the game. As per the rules, a member of the losing team had to face a punishment. Lum's father put Arata forward to take the punishment on behalf of their team. Meanwhile, after finishing his meal, the fortune teller opened a portal for Arata's parents, allowing them to see him facing the punishment along with the others. After some time, when Arata started feeling unwell, his friends came over to his house to check on him. Mendo was also among them, primarily there to see Lum, but when they didn't find her around, they got angry at Arata. Arata explained to them that Lum had gone to Neptune to meet some of her old friends. While they were discussing this, the fortune teller stepped in and pointed out how the room had suddenly become colder. Mendo noticed something strange in the cupboard, so he decided to open it. Suddenly, a pile of snow fell on top of him, and out of the snow emerged an alien girl, who turned out to be none other than Lum's old friend Yukari. She had accidentally ended up there and was preparing to return, but before leaving, she asked everyone to help send her back. The boys couldn't refuse her requests, so they agreed to assist. Even Arata, despite feeling unwell, decided to go along with them. Meanwhile, on Neptune, everyone was surprised by heavy snowfall. During this, they heard Lum's voice coming from a well. Hearing this, Mendo pushed Arata into the well without a second thought. A little while later, when Arata opened his eyes, he found Lum standing right in front of him. Meanwhile, Mendo and the other boys were thrilled to see so many girls around them. The girls approached them and sent them off to do various tasks. On this planet, it was customary for all the boys to do the work. In the meantime, Arata went to Yukari's house with Lum and Yukari. For the first time, he accidentally saw Yukari changing clothes and he became instantly captivated by her. But Lum didn't like his behavior at all and immediately attacked him with her thunder. A little later, Arata, trying to save himself, ended up in Yukari's room, and shortly after, Yukari came in as well, trying to get closer to him. Suddenly, the wall cracked open and a gigantic monster emerged from it. Yukari explained that this monster was like her big brother, and that he would kill any guy who tried to get close to her. Hearing this, Arata, fearing for his life, quickly ran away. Because of the monster's attack, Arata's name started spreading everywhere. His story even made it onto the news. During another encounter, the monster badly injured Arata, and he was hospitalized the next day. Meanwhile, Shinobu noticed that everyone was present except for Mendo. It turned out that Mendo was still on Neptune, working in front of the girls. A little while later, Arata returned to school and announced his decision to retire. Even the teachers thought he was planning to retire from life and felt deeply sorry for him. But they were mistaken, as Arata actually had something else in mind. Just as Arata was about to explain everything, Mendo stepped forward and revealed that Arata actually wanted to retire as the main hero of the story. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Mendo then tried to proclaim himself as the new main hero, but this competition wasn't going to be easy as all the other characters from the story showed up, each one wanting to take Arata's place. Seeing this, Arata got really angry because he had no intention of giving up his position as the main hero. In reality, he was only talking about stepping down as the class president. This revelation turned everyone's hopes into disappointment. The next day, Arata was at the swimming pool, where he had an encounter with a cute little monster. But how did this happen? For that, we need to rewind a bit. Earlier, the whole group had gone to Mendo's hotel for a swim. They were all playing together when Mendo noticed Lum's swimsuit and started complimenting her. This didn't sit well with Shinobu until she managed to get some compliments for herself. In the end, everyone's attention turned to Sakura, who was also there. The moment Arata saw her, he blurted out a proposal for marriage, which made her so angry that she threw him into the pool. A little later, Lum became worried because Arata still hadn't come out of the water. In fact, this was the exact moment when Arata had met the monster, who was treating him like a guest and holding him close. However, the monster didn't realize that Arata was having trouble breathing underwater. Soon after, Lum also arrived at the scene and somehow managing to push Arata out of the water, sat down in front of the monster herself. When Arata got out, he started telling everyone about the monster, but nobody believed him. Meanwhile, the monster noticed that all of its snacks had run out, so it quickly stepped outside. Seeing a monster, everyone around started panicking and running away. During the chaos, Mendo and the others reached Lum, who was struggling to catch her breath. By then, the monster had returned and was surprised to see so many guests. The monster genuinely wanted to take care of them, but Mendo stopped it, explaining that it couldn't stay there any longer. Hearing this, the monster started to panic because it had nowhere else to go. However, Mendo was firm in his decision as the monster's presence was scaring everyone away. In the end, the monster had no choice but to listen to Mendo, and after saying goodbye to Arata and the others, left to search for a new home. A little while later, when Arata got back home and was about to take a shower, he noticed the same monster had arrived at his house, now looking for a place to stay. A month passed, and Arata's mother now insisted that before Arata went out, he needed to relocate the monster to a different place. The monster was also ready to move, and Arata's mother assured it that if it found a new home, she would send its belongings there via courier. A little while later, Arata took the monster to the beach. Meanwhile, there was another kid nearby who had come to leave his pet in someone else's care. At this point, Arata left the monster at the beach. The monster's gaze then fell on Sakura, who was sitting with her date. At the same time, Arata sneaked over and started watching Sakura secretly. Sakura and her date were just about to kiss, and even Mendo and the others were hiding and watching them. Suddenly, the monster jumped in between them, completely ruining the moment. In the midst of the chaos, the rest of the group also got caught spying on them. In the end, Arata and his friends decided to spend some time with the monster by the shore. Before the monster left, they wanted to throw it a proper farewell party. Meanwhile, the boy, seeing them having fun with the monster, felt happy and left his pet with them as well. As he was walking away, memories of the times he had spent with his pet started flooding his mind. On the other hand, Arata was about to send the monster off when the boy suddenly returned, picked up the box along with the monster, and left with it. At that moment, the boy accidentally took the box with a monster inside instead of his own box. A little later, the others realized the mistake and quickly opened the box to check inside. What they saw left them completely shocked. Instead of a pet, the fortune teller was inside the box, having been treated as the boy's pet for the past few days. A few days passed, and one day Arata's mother came to him and told him about the monster's new home. It turned out that the monster was now living happily with the boy, and knowing this made Arata very happy. Sometime later, Arata's class teacher was called to meet the principal, so he went to see him. There, the principal informed him that a new student would be joining their school. As soon as he said this, a powerful earthquake shook the entire area, which was caused by none other than Lum's father. After a while, they all sat down to discuss Lum's admission into the class. Once everything was settled, Lum was sent to her new class. Meanwhile, Arata was leisurely eating lunch, but when he found out that Lum had joined his class, he choked on his food in shock. Shortly afterward, a sports event was about to begin, and Arata was there with his friends checking out the girls. He noticed that a new girl had also transferred along with Lum. The moment he looked at her, she smiled back at him, and seeing this, he immediately rushed over to her. While Arata was flirting with the girl, Lum arrived and tried to stop him. The new girl, whose name was Ran, got scared after realizing that Lum was an alien. Lum noticed her and secretly asked her to meet after school. Ran was quite frightened by Lum's behavior, but she mustered up the courage and went to meet her. Here we see that the two were actually old friends, and Ran had come to the school without revealing her true identity. When Lum asked her why she was here, Ran explained that a few days ago, while reminiscing about the past, she remembered how they both fell in love with the same boy named Rai when they were young. In the end, Lum was the lucky one, as she managed to get engaged to Ri. Ran then revealed that Lum had stolen her first love, and now she was here to take revenge by stealing Lum's husband, Arata. In other words, Ran's real reason for coming here was to execute her revenge plan. A little later, a game started where all the girls had to gather items written on a piece of paper. During the game, Ran called Arata over to her. Just as he was heading toward her, Lum tried to stop him. At that moment, Mendo stepped in and led Lum away, taking her with him. Taking advantage of the situation, Ran pulled Arata aside and tried to kiss him. Arata, happy about the idea, was just about to kiss her back, but Lum arrived just in time and stopped him. Then the next game began, where everyone piled on top of each other in a chaotic scramble. During the game, Arata moved toward Ran intending to kiss her, but his plan failed when another boy jumped in between them. As soon as Ran kissed the boy, he suddenly became weak. It turned out that Ran had a special power. Whoever she kissed, she could drain their energy and transfer it into her own body. Lum somehow managed to save Arata. Later, after school, Lum and Ran were sitting together in a park. During their conversation, Lum tried to convince Ran that she should stop bothering Arata. At first, Lum thought Ran was agreeing, but she was wrong. Ran had made up her mind that she would never forgive Lum for taking her love. The next day, Lum was at school, worried that Ran might try to trouble them again. As she was lost in these thoughts, a small robot sent by Ran approached her and revealed that Ran was planning to return to her planet. But before leaving, she wanted to spend some quality time with Lum and her husband. At that moment, Lum thought that Ran might really be leaving, so a little later she showed up with Arata to meet her. It was interesting to see Lum trying to act normal in front of them, but her mind was busy plotting something else. After serving them dinner and stepping out of the room, Lum revealed that she had secretly mixed a sleeping drug into the food. Ran's initial plan had failed, so she then asked Lum to go to the kitchen. Meanwhile, Lum decided to secretly spy on them to see if Ran was planning anything. While watching from the kitchen, she was surprised to see that even though Arata was trying to get close to Ran, she was refusing his advances and stopping him from doing anything. By this point, Lum started believing that maybe Ran had really changed. But she was wrong. As soon as Lum's attention shifted away from Arata, Ran put him into a machine that created an exact copy of him. One that looked and spoke exactly like Arata. Seeing another Arata in front of him left the real Arata completely shocked. Meanwhile, when Lum returned looking for Arata, Ran's plan was to hand over the fake Arata to her. But this plan failed too because Ran accidentally gave Lum the real Arata instead of the fake one. After Lum left, Ran tried to kiss the fake Arata, but the machine-made copy malfunctioned and broke down completely. Night fell and Lum assumed that Ran must have left for her planet by now. However, when she arrived at school the next day, she was stunned to see Ran still there. It turned out that Ran had made up her mind that she wouldn't leave until she had properly taught Lum a lesson. In the next scene, we see the fortune teller preparing dinner for himself when he suddenly senses an impending disaster. A major threat was about to come their way. Meanwhile, Lum was shocked to see Arata eagerly waiting for Shinobu and cleaning the entire house for her. Seeing this made Lum upset because Arata never bothered to clean the room otherwise. To calm Lum down, Arata explained that he just wanted to discuss some school-related topics with Shinobu. At the same time, we see Shinobu heading toward Arata's house, but suddenly, a monster appears in front of her, causing her to scream in fear. A little later, the fortune teller arrived at Arata's place and began warning him about the impending disaster. Arata tried his best to ignore it, but just then, Shinobu appeared at the window. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a tiger. Shinobu revealed the truth that the tiger was actually Reed, who had come here searching for Lum. As soon as Rie transformed into his true form, everyone was mesmerized by his handsome appearance. Despite all this, Lum wasn't affected at all and started ignoring him. At that moment, Arata's mother showed up and instantly fell for Rie's charm. Somehow, she managed to leave the place. Afterward, Rie confessed his feelings to Lum, but she rejected him as well. In the meantime, Arata's mother returned with some snacks. To everyone's surprise, this time she was wearing makeup. When Rie kissed her hand, she practically lost her mind and went crazy over him. Meanwhile, when Lum kept rejecting Rie repeatedly, he turned his frustration toward Arata and began chasing him. Trying to escape from Rie, Arata ran out into the street. During this chase, Rie ended up in the middle of a group of girls and they all went wild over his good looks. Not only that, but Rie also had a huge appetite, so he devoured every food stall in sight, leaving nothing behind. Everyone was shocked by his actions. A little later, when they returned home, all the girls who had fallen for him showed up in front of Rie. At the same time, all the stall owners whose stalls Rie had destroyed gathered around Arata, demanding compensation. The next day, Mendo was at school, trying to contact his helicopter, but he overheard someone mentioning Rie's name. Before he could process anything, Rie burst through the window, creating a scene of complete chaos. Hearing the noise, Ran, who was nearby, recognized it as Rie's voice. Back at school, Rie was focused on eating without causing any more damage. During this, Mendo began making fun of his appearance. Arata tried to stop him, knowing that this was a bad idea and could lead to serious trouble. Hearing Mendo's taunts, Rie transformed into his true form and even Mendo was stunned by his beauty. All the girls who were once crazy about Mendo instantly shifted their attention to Rie. During this, Lum also showed up, and as soon as Rie saw her, he started approaching her. But just then, Ran bravely stepped forward and placed her lunch in front of him. Rie started eating the lunch one bite at a time, and Ran thought she had finally made him happy with her food. However, after finishing the meal, Rie once again ran straight toward Lum. Everyone realized that no matter how hard Ran tried, she would never win a place in Rie's heart. Lum thought that Ran's heart must be broken, but she was wrong. Ran showed up moments later with a fresh lunch and sat down next to Ria again. This time too, Ria calmly finished all the food. Afterward, Ria suddenly remembered something and rushed straight to his home to satisfy his remaining hunger. Ran was delighted because she got a chance to spend time with him. Later, after school, when Arata and Lum returned home, they were shocked to see Ria already there. Apparently, he had been sitting there for a long time, eating non-stop. By then, night had fallen and Arata's parents were facing a new problem. The issue was that the next day was Arata's parent-teacher meeting PTM, and his mother decided that no matter what, she would attend. Meanwhile, Lum's mother, who was currently in space, also started putting on makeup, preparing herself to attend the PTM the following day. The next day arrived and it was time for the PTM. Arata's mother was relieved and happy because her son hadn't caused any trouble over the past few days, so she felt there was nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, we see an ox cart pulling up right in front of the school carrying a woman and some bodyguards. Arata's mother was surprised to see this lady, but then suddenly, a spaceship descended and landed directly on top of the ox cart. During this, the bodyguards somehow managed to save the woman's life, and then we saw Lum's mother emerge from the spaceship. As soon as she noticed Arata's mother, she started talking to her. However, their languages were completely different, making it impossible for anyone to understand what they were saying. At that moment, Mendo arrived and approached the woman in the ox cart. It turned out that she was Mendo's mother. Her bodyguards explained the entire situation to Mendo and advised him to somehow make Lum's mother feel insulted in front of everyone. Mendo was still contemplating this idea when Lum suddenly appeared and hugged her mother. Meanwhile, Mendo's mother's bodyguards began emotionally blackmailing him, making him feel obligated to go and talk to Lum's mother, even though he didn't want to. On one hand, Mendo's mother was sharing her grievances about being insulted, and Mendo, in turn, tried to pass this onto Lum so she could tell her mother. However, Lum had trouble understanding, so instead of sharing complaints, she ended up conveying only positive things to her mother. Because of this, Lum's mother became very happy with Mendo. After this little misunderstanding and drama, the school bell rang and there was no other option left but to go home. Even Arata's teacher, who had been feeling unwell and arrived late to school, had already missed most of the event. By the time she got to the school, all the parents had already taken their children home. Meanwhile, Arata's mother went to his classroom and found him asleep. She was happy because, for once, he hadn't caused any trouble that day. The next morning, when Lum saw that Arata was still deeply asleep and was going to be late for school, she used her thunder power to wake him up. But Arata had grown tired of this constant treatment and, ignoring Lum completely, left for school. At school, Arata, as usual, was busy chatting and flirting with the girls. Meanwhile, Lum was working on something special for him. Mendo, who was completely fed up with Arata's behavior, tried to explain that if he kept flirting with other girls like this, it would lead to trouble. Arata angrily responded that he didn't care at all and continued doing as he pleased. This situation hurt Lum somewhere deep down, but she managed to brush it off for the moment. A little while later, Arata and Lum returned home, where another argument broke out between them. That night, after Arata had fallen asleep, Lum quietly said goodbye to him and left. The next morning, when Arata looked everywhere, he couldn't find Lum anywhere. He thought she had just gone missing for a little while, so when he got to school, he spent the day happily goofing around with all the girls. But when Arata returned home from school, his mother told him that Lum had been missing since morning. At that point, Arata began to worry, thinking that maybe she had left him for good. He kept the doll that Lum had made as her final keepsake, holding onto it as her last memory. The next day, Arata went to school as usual, but this time, other students were also asking about Lum's whereabouts. Eventually, Arata started to believe that Mendo might have captured Lum, so he confronted him and demanded to know where she was. It became clear to everyone that even Arata had no idea where Lum had gone. In the next moment, Mendo used all his resources and power to search for Lum. However, despite their best efforts, both Arata and Mendo failed to find her. Meanwhile, Lum was actually in space with her parents because she needed to renew her license to return to Earth, which is why she had gone missing. During this time, Lum's parents tried to find out if everything was going well between her and Arata. Lum assured them that they were both very happy and that there were no issues between them. Just then, Lum's father accidentally turned on the radio, and they heard the sound of Arata crying. It turned out that Lum had hidden a radio chip inside the doll she made for Arata so she could keep an eye on him. Realizing this, Lum understood that even though Arata acted indifferent to her, deep down he really did care about her. The next day, as Arata was heading to school, Lum secretly returned. At first, Arata didn't notice her presence and continued walking towards school, but then Lum suddenly appeared in front of him. Arata was genuinely happy to see her but tried not to show it. Finally, after forgiving her, he headed to school with Lum by his side. As New Year's Eve approached, the girl was seen passing through the market, sitting on an ox cart. Her guards had been carrying her on their shoulders for the past few days. At the same time, Arata was also strolling around the market with Lum. During this, the unknown girl blew a kiss onto her handkerchief and tossed it out, which landed right in front of Arata. Arata smelled the handkerchief and realized it belonged to a girl, so he began searching for her, following the scent. He reached the ox cart and tried to peek inside, but suddenly he saw a creepy face that scared him off, making him run away. Later, when he got to school, Arata told Mendo about the incident, which left Mendo a little surprised. From his expression, it was clear that Mendo knew something about the girl in the ox cart. He was lost in thought when lunchtime arrived and everyone was busy with their meals. Just then, the girl from the ox cart appeared at the school, shocking everyone except Mendo. The beautiful girl stepped out of the cart and stood right in front of Mendo. All the girls in the class were stunned by this mysterious girl's presence. They all started questioning Mendo about his connection to her. At that moment, the girl stepped forward and revealed that she was Mendo's fiancée. Hearing this, all the girls in the class were furious at Mendo. But Mendo quickly revealed to everyone that the girl was lying. She wasn't his fiancée but his sister, who loved playing pranks. Hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Arata, seeing Mendo's sister, started flirting with her, but Mendo kept trying to keep him away from his sister. Mendo's sister was holding a lunchbox that she had specially prepared for Mendo. She tried offering it to him, but he refused, explaining that it had been 4 days since she left home with that lunch. In other words, the food was completely spoiled. His sister was upset by Mendo's rejection, but then Arata stepped forward and decided to eat the lunch himself. Seeing this, Mendo's sister became a fan of Arata and watched him eat with admiration. On one hand, Lum was trying to stop Arata, while on the other, Mendo was determined not to let Arata get close to his sister. At that moment, Mendo's sister ordered her guards to lock Mendo in the cupboard, giving Arata a chance to get closer to her. After much effort, Mendo finally managed to escape from the cupboard and stopped Arata from doing anything further. Then New Year's Day arrived and everyone went to Mendo's house because his sister had personally invited them. Once there, Lum tried to show off her beautiful kimono dress to Arata. However, Arata ignored her and instead complimented Sakura when he saw her. Just then, Lum's 2 alien friends also showed up. They had originally come for a casual visit, but when Mendo noticed them, he personally invited them to the party. Eventually, everyone began making their way inside the house. Just then, Mendo's sister announced to the entire group to come inside. Although she appeared polite and welcoming, she had something else on her mind. A little while later, everyone entered the room one by one and was asked to take a seat. They did as instructed, but suddenly, the wall in front of them started moving toward them, closing in. Somehow, they managed to escape into another room. However, a guard approached them in a dangerous vehicle, blocking their path. They tried moving forward again, but Mendo noticed how Lum and her friends were also there. On one hand, Arata was shocked to see that, in the blink of an eye, one of the girls had disappeared. Determined to figure out what was happening, Arata ventured ahead on his own. Meanwhile, Mendo and the others ran into Mendo's grandfather. After a bit of chaos, they found themselves in a room where they were required to participate in a food-eating competition. At that moment, Arata arrived and decided to join them in the contest. The next day, Arata was surprised to see his parents happily taking photos of Lum in a dress. They were thrilled because they had always longed for a daughter, and Lum's presence had filled that gap for them. Afterward, they all sat down for dinner together. But during the meal, Arata had to endure some harsh comments about how much they had hoped for a son. Frustrated and angry, he stormed out of the house. Outside the house, Arata noticed a courier delivery, but it turned out to be an alien kid. The kid's name was Ten, and he had come to Earth specifically to meet Lum. Arata brought Lum inside, and as soon as Lum saw Ten, she became very happy. Ten wasn't just any kid. He was Lum's cousin who had come to visit her. Ten slowly floated up and flew toward Lum. Seeing him fly, Arata's parents started taking photos of him again. A little later, everyone sat down together as Ten began to share how he had tracked Lum's location and managed to come here. However, Arata didn't seem too thrilled about his presence. Even when they all went to the park later, Lum was happily spending time with her cousin, while Arata and Ten didn't seem to get along well. Ten quickly noticed this and told Arata that if he was really Lum's husband, he was quite upset with him. But Arata didn't seem to care and started ignoring Ten, walking away. This made Ten furious, and he launched a fire attack at Arata. Later, they all went to Sakura's house to spend some time together. During their visit, Ten's attention shifted to Sakura, and he was instantly smitten by her hospitality. The group planned to play a game together, but just then, Ran showed up, surprising everyone. Seeing Ran, Ten was overjoyed and excitedly revealed to everyone how Ran used to be his neighbor on his planet. But Ran desperately wanted to hide her true identity from everyone. Meanwhile, Lum was happy because Ten's words were bringing Ran's real story to light. However, Ran quickly used her wits to divert the situation. She told everyone that Ten was mistaken because she only looked like the girl who used to live next door to him. Lum, on the other hand, was trying to support Ten to expose Ran's truth. This made Ran furious, and she threatened Lum, saying that if she revealed her secret, then Ran would tell everyone about Lum's bedwetting habit. With that, the matter was put to rest, and they all went back to playing their game. During the game, Arata started holding all the girls' hands, including Sakura's. But Ten didn't like this and attacked Arata with fire. Afterward, Sakura decided to end the game and started talking to Ten. Ten, floating in the air, tried to get closer to Sakura, but he was moving too slowly, so Arata began whacking him. Annoyed, Ten attacked Arata with fire once again and then moved towards Sakura. The tension between Arata and Ten continued to escalate, and when Arata was about to retaliate in anger, Sakura stepped in to protect Ten, attacking Arata instead. Seeing Sakura standing up for him, Ten fell in love with her. The next day, Ten was sitting alone trying to write a letter. When Arata realized that he was attempting to write a love letter, he decided to help him out. It turned out that Ten was writing this letter for none other than Sakura, wanting to express his feelings to her. Using his creativity, Arata took over and ended up writing all sorts of nonsense in the letter, which was eventually sent to Sakura. When Sakura opened and read the letter, she was shocked to find many vulgar words written in it. Along with that, the letter mentioned a specific location to meet. Furious, Sakura decided to confront the sender immediately. Meanwhile, Arata and Ten were already waiting at the spot. Ten was initially too scared to face Sakura, but with Arata's encouragement, he finally stepped forward to meet her. Sakura was prepared to give the sender a piece of her mind, but the moment she saw Ten, she was taken aback. She couldn't believe that the person behind the letter was this tiny kid. Instead of scolding him, she was too stunned to speak and ended up nodding along to everything he said. Ten then confessed that he wanted to go on a date with her, and surprisingly, she agreed. Arata, who had expected a completely different outcome, was utterly shocked by her reaction. Afterward, Ten told Sakura that he wanted to take her to a hotel. When Sakura arrived at the hotel, she was completely dumbfounded. It turned out to be an adults-only hotel. In the end, Sakura took Ten to a regular hotel instead, where they sat and started talking. Sakura noticed that Ten looked disappointed about not going to the adult hotel. Finally, Ten revealed that his next plan was to watch a movie with her. Sakura agreed again, and they went to a movie theater. When they arrived, Sakura realized that the movie was meant for, and she tried to take him away. But Ten firmly stated that he wanted to watch that specific movie. Left with no choice, Sakura gave in, and they went in to watch the film. Meanwhile, Arata and Lum were secretly watching them from a distance. After some time, while they were watching the movie, Sakura noticed that Ten had fallen asleep. By then, Sakura had also lost interest in the movie, but Arata and Lum, who had sneaked into the theater, were completely engrossed. They were so excited that in their enthusiasm, they jumped right in front of Sakura, startling her. Sakura was shocked to see them there, to which they explained that it was just a coincidence they ended up at the same place. After the movie ended, they all left together. That night, Ten decided to have one last conversation with Sakura and finally express his feelings. He confessed to her that he had fallen in love and even proposed marriage to her. Ten quickly realized that Sakura had rejected him, which made him feel very sad. A little while later, when Arata approached him, Ten blamed him for everything that had gone wrong. Filled with frustration, Ten ended up attacking Arata with fire again. The next day, all the school staff gathered for a meeting to discuss how to prevent the students from eating outside snacks. While they were talking, one of the students overheard their discussion and informed the other students about the plan. By then, all the students had decided to ruin the teacher's plan, and they eagerly waited for school to end. When the bell rang and school was over, they planned to rush straight to their favorite restaurants. As they all reached the school gate, Mendo appeared with the other student council members ready to assist the teachers in enforcing the rule. However, Arata managed to distract Mendo with his clever talk, allowing the other students to slip past and escape. Eventually, Arata and the rest of the students made it to a ramen restaurant, where they were relieved to see that no teachers were around. But unknown to them, the shop owner had lied. Their class teacher was secretly watching them from a hidden spot. Even a waitress tried to grab Arata's hand to warn him and explain the situation, but he misunderstood, thinking that she liked him and was winking at him on purpose. The teacher then attacked all the students, and everyone scrambled to save themselves and ran out of the restaurant. They managed to get pretty far, but just then, Mendo appeared again with the other council members, blocking their path. Mendo was determined to stop them from going any further, but when a few girls pleaded with him to let them pass, he gave in. Unable to refuse the girls, he allowed them through. Taking advantage of the situation, a few boys disguised themselves as girls and slipped past as well. The chase between the teachers and students continued for quite a while, with the class teacher capturing a few students and holding them hostage. But then the police arrived, mistaking the teacher for a kidnapper and arresting him. During this chaos, a reporter showed up and started encouraging people to support the students. However, when a crowd of boys joined the scene, the reporter himself became a victim and got caught up in the mess. The conflict between the teachers and students escalated significantly. Meanwhile, Arata and some other students found their way to a nearby restaurant, where luck was on their side. The cafe owner had already captured all the teachers, allowing the students to sit down and comfortably order food. Meanwhile, the class teacher was still in police custody, trying desperately to negotiate his release. During this time, one of the senior teachers in the group got seriously injured, which motivated the remaining teachers to rally together for one last fight. Eventually, both teams engaged in an all-out battle, but neither side could reach a clear outcome. The scene then shifted to Arata, who was sitting outside a cafe, watching all the girls chatting. He noticed how popular Ten had become among them, with the girls happily feeding him by hand. During this, the topic of conversation shifted to Sakura's fiancé, whom she had recently started a relationship with. As Sakura talked about her fiancé, Ten suddenly interrupted the conversation. He asked her whether she was absolutely sure that this guy would marry her. Sakura found Ten's question a bit strange, and to clarify his point, Ten showed them all a video. The video featured a man introducing a special tablet that could show the future of any couple, allowing them to see their future partner. The astonishing part was that the results were said to be 100% accurate and unchangeable. Intrigued, Shinobu was the first to try the tablet. When she saw her future partner's face, she was utterly shocked. Next, it was Ran's turn. When she looked, she saw Arata's face on the screen, which left her distressed. Immediately, Lum's gaze turned to Ri, and she tried to hide the situation from Ran to prevent any arguments from breaking out between them. None of them were happy with the partner they saw on the screen. Meanwhile, Shinobu tried to ask Sakura where her fiancé was at that moment. Sakura confidently replied that there was no need to worry because he would be arriving soon. Hearing this, Shinobu's face turned pale, which made everyone suspicious. The truth was that the partner Shinobu saw in her crystal was none other than Sakura's fiancé. When Sakura found out, she couldn't believe it. To confirm for herself, she checked the crystal again. But this time, she saw Arata's and Mendo's faces. Completely confused by what was happening, Sakura was at a loss for words. Taking advantage of the situation, Ten sneaked away, and just then, Sakura's fiancé arrived with Arata and Mendo in tow. Sakura immediately lectured Arata and Mendo, telling them that they were too young to even think about marrying her, so they should get that idea out of their heads. On the other hand, Sakura's fiancé was shocked to learn that Shinobu was his supposed future partner. However, just when her fiancé started considering Shinobu as his future partner, Sakura stepped in and began scolding him. Meanwhile, Ten saw breaking news on his TV, revealing that the crystal ball they had been using was actually a defective one, designed to create misunderstandings between couples. Eventually, Ten received the real crystal ball, but by then, it was too late, and he chose not to use it again. The next day, a boy named Tom appeared, trying to sneak into the school by using a pulley system. However, the class teacher spotted him and tried to stop him. But Tom ignored the teacher's warnings and continued his efforts, only to fall down shortly afterward. Meanwhile, not too far away, Mendo and Arata were playing a game of baseball. A student approached Arata and told him that if he wanted tickets to the pool, he'd have to lose this game. Arata, determined to get the tickets at any cost, agreed to lose the game. As soon as Arata pitched the first ball to Mendo, Mendo easily hit it, and the ball flew straight towards Tom, hitting him. Everyone watched in shock as Tom, instead of getting hurt, casually picked up the ball and ate it. While everyone was still trying to process what just happened, Mendo stepped forward, recognizing Tom immediately. It turned out that Tom and Mendo were childhood friends. Tom was the son of the owner of a sports company, and the two used to play games together when they were kids. One day, during a game, Mendo managed to win against Tom. Ever since that day, Tom vowed to train rigorously and challenge Mendo to a rematch after a few years. Hearing this, Arata decided to recruit Tom into his team. However, when Tom was tested, it became evident that he could barely throw the ball properly. But since Arata had to lose the game anyway, he happily added Tom to his team without hesitation. Meanwhile, Mendo's sister also showed up. She used to tease Tom a lot when they were kids, but deep down, she actually liked him. As the game started, she stood off to the side, watching him intently. When Mendo pitched the first ball to Tom, Tom completely missed it. Mendo assumed that he would easily win the game, but he was wrong. His sister secretly sent in her supporters to join the game and help Tom win. Somehow, Tom managed to connect with the ball and was about to hit a home run. Arata, determined not to win the game under any circumstances, tried his best to prevent the ball from going out. After a lot of struggle, he wasn't able to stop his team from scoring, but he did manage to bring the game to a tie instead of a win. Afterward, we see Tom's bodyguards who were worried because he had gone missing. In reality, Tom was waiting somewhere, eager to challenge Mendo to a rematch as soon as he arrived. Meanwhile, Mendo's sister, Ryoko, heard about Tom's disappearance and decided to go look for him herself. When Tom saw someone approaching, he thought it was Mendo and invited him to meet him for a duel. However, Ryoko misunderstood and assumed that Tom had written her a love letter and was asking her out. Just then, Mendo himself showed up, furious at his sister because she had trapped him inside a cement wall earlier. He had barely managed to escape and get there in time, unaware that Ryoko had another prank up her sleeve. Unfortunately, Mendo got caught up in her mischief and barely escaped the blast. Despite being injured, Mendo was determined not to let his sister meet Tom under any circumstances. With no other options, Ryoko sent some of her people to Arata asking for his help. After listening to everything, Arata agreed to assist her. Meanwhile, Lum was busy looking for Arata when she stumbled upon a letter written by Tom. She followed the clues and arrived at Tom's location only to find that he was already in a difficult situation. Just then, Ryoko and Arata showed up together, surprising Tom even more as he had expected Mendo, but found his sister instead. At that moment, Ryoko revealed that she had come because of the letter Tom wrote, but Tom had something entirely different on his mind. Suddenly, one of Ryoko's guards, who was harassing Tom, stepped forward and took off his disguise, revealing that he was none other than Mendo, who was there to prevent his sister from meeting Tom. Now that his identity was out, Tom told Mendo that he had been preparing to challenge him to a fight. Mendo, taking the situation seriously, accepted the challenge and declared that if Tom defeated him, he would let Tom date his sister. However, Tom tried to explain that Mendo was misunderstanding everything, but Mendo refused to listen and launched into a fight. As the battle between the two began, Arata saw an opportunity. He picked up Ryoko in his arms and started running off with her, intending to make her his own. Just then, Lum appeared and stopped him from doing anything foolish. Finally, things began to calm down, and Tom tried to make Mendo understand that he had no romantic feelings for his sister. In fact, the letter was never meant for Ryoko, but was directed at Mendo himself. But when Mendo noticed the love symbol drawn on the letter, he became enraged and attacked Tom again. Ryoko, realizing things were getting out of hand, tried to escape. However, Lum intervened, causing Tom to stumble and fall in the chaos. Tom was furious this time because Ryoko had been bothering him since childhood, so he decided to ignore her and started running away. In response, Ryoko, pulling one of her prank moves, used a small bomb to draw Tom back to her. Seeing this, Mendo also concluded that no one could separate them and agreed to their marriage. However, Tom had absolutely no intention of marrying Ryoko and didn't share these thoughts at all. The next day, Lum was on her way home when she noticed Ran along the road. She approached her and started a conversation. Seeing Ran looking so happy, Lum curiously asked if she was planning to go on a date with Ri. Upon hearing this, Ran became quite angry, thinking that Lum was taunting her. At this point, we see Ran's flashback, where she had prepared a large amount of food for Ri, while Rai happily ate everything she made, and the most surprising moment came when Ri suddenly kissed her. Now, while Lum was visiting Ran's house, Ran shared this entire story with her. Ran had no idea that Lum would be genuinely happy for her, but Lum's mind was working on a different track altogether. To Lum, if Ran got along well with Ray, it would mean that she would no longer be interested in Arata. Overjoyed by this big news, Lum cheerfully returned home only to find that Ri was already there waiting for her. Lum gets angry at Ri because Ran had told her that they had already kissed, but instead of spending time with Ran, he came here to have dinner. Lum was trying to explain this to Ri when Ran herself arrived, considering Lum as her friend and wanting to join her for dinner. But the moment Ran's eyes landed on Ri, her heart shattered. She got upset with Lum once again for being with Ri. Despite Lum's attempts to explain the situation, Ran wasn't willing to listen. At that moment, Ran stepped forward and placed her lunch in front of Ri, who once again started eating it happily. When Ri noticed some food stains on Ran's face, he leaned in and kissed her to clean them off. So the reason Ri had kissed Ran last time was simply because there were food stains on her face. However, instead of thinking about this, Ran was simply happy that Ri had kissed her. A little while later, Ran and Lum met at a restaurant to talk about their past. After catching up, they began reminiscing about their childhood, recalling a time when they had a sleepover. The next morning, when they woke up, Ran's mother noticed that someone had wet the bed. The culprit was actually Lum, but she ignored the situation, which led Ran's mother to get angry at her own daughter. After a while, Lum tried to calm Ran down by suggesting they share their true feelings with each other, which seemed to work. Lum was happy while listening to this story in the cafe, but Ran couldn't digest it, as there was more to the story that Lum hadn't shared. We switch back to a flashback where Ran was staying over at Lum's house for another sleepover, and once again, Lum wet the bed. When Ran's mother came to pick her up, she saw the wet bed and got angry at her daughter. Several incidents like this happened between Ran and Lum, where Ran had to suffer because of Lum. One time, Ran came over to play with Lum, but ended up getting hurt after bumping into a mountain. In the end, to stop Ran from crying, Lum promised to treat her. But when the time came to pay for the treat, Lum pushed Ran forward, making her take care of the payment. Once again, Ran was trapped because of Lum. Back in the present, after hearing this entire story, Lum realized how badly she had treated Ran and genuinely felt regret. However, as they were leaving the restaurant, Lum put the entire bill on Ran again, making her angry all over again. A little later, when Ataru and Shinobu were walking together, they noticed Sakura burning something. When they asked her about it, they found out that she was performing some sort of black magic. They didn't think much of it until Sakura revealed that she was creating a potion that could ignite love in people. After hearing this, both girls willingly agreed to help her with the potion. After putting in a lot of effort, they finally finished preparing the potion. Lum took the potion and went to Ataru, hoping it would make him fall in love with her. Somehow, she managed to give him the potion, and soon after, its effects started to show. She noticed that Ataru began liking her instantly. As they went outside, the potion made Ataru start lying to everyone around him. He even went so far as to tell his mother that he was leaving home and that it would be the last time they'd see each other. Lum was completely confused, wondering what was happening to Ataru. Later, she found out from Sakura that she had mistakenly made a liar potion instead of a lover potion. As a result, wherever Ataru went, he couldn't stop lying to people. A few days later, Ataru and the others went to the beach to have some fun. There, they noticed a father and son standing by the ocean, playing with the waves. Suddenly, when a strong wave injured both of them, the son got furious at his father and started hitting him. The onlookers watched the whole scene, wondering what was going on. As they were about to leave, the father stepped forward and invited everyone to his restaurant. Even though everyone decided to follow him to the restaurant, the surprising part was that the father and son were still arguing. The father revealed that he wanted to teach his son everything about running the restaurant because he planned to hand it over to him in the future. However, the son, named Ryoko, had different dreams and didn't want to manage the restaurant. Instead, he wanted to pursue another career. This led to yet another fight between the father and daughter. Seeing them struggle, Lum and the other girls felt pity and decided to help them. However, Ataru and Mendu advised them to ignore the situation and focus on enjoying themselves instead. While everyone was about to leave, the father once again tried to explain things to his child. But Ryoko didn't take it well, and she revealed that she wasn't a boy but a girl, and thus wanted to be treated as one. Ataru and Mendo, who had been watching from a distance, were shocked to learn that Ryoko was actually a girl. They quickly changed their minds and decided to step in and help her. They both tried to get close to Ryoko in their own way, but she ended up teaching them a lesson instead. After that, the argument between Ryoko and her father escalated once more, prompting the others to think about leaving. But this time, the father stepped forward and requested their help. Even though they were about to ignore him, he mentioned that he would offer free food in exchange for their assistance. Tempted by the thought of free food, they all agreed to help. In the midst of it, they noticed that the father and daughter had started fighting again. Realizing that things were getting worse, the group decided to take drastic action to put an end to the argument once and for all. The very next moment, when the father and daughter woke up, they found themselves facing each other, their hands chained together. They were furious and started pulling at the chains, trying to break free and attack each other. As they struggled, they looked around and noticed that their entire shop was completely destroyed. The next day, when Ataru and Lum were on their way to school, they noticed Ryoko and her father, who had now packed up their belongings and moved into the city. The argument between them was still ongoing, and there seemed to be no way to calm them down. A little while later, Ryoko's father mentioned that since Ryoko was now attending school, if she could defeat him in a fight, he would allow her to wear a girl's uniform. Ryoko was determined to wear the dress no matter what, so she agreed to the challenge and got ready to fight her father. She even took off her outer clothing, preparing to face him seriously. However, right as they were about to fight, Ataru accidentally stepped in between them, causing Ryoko to lose the match. This meant that the next day she had to show up at school dressed as a boy. When she entered the classroom, neither Mendo nor Ataru could focus on anything. Meanwhile, the other boys in the class held a meeting where they decided to get a girl's dress for Ryoko to make her happy. So Mendu and the other boys went to Ryoko's father and after a tough scuffle, managed to get hold of the dress and later presented it to Ryoko. They told her how they convinced her father to let her have the dress. But despite everything they said, Ryoko was adamant that no matter what, she wouldn't wear the dress unless she could beat her father in a fight. Later, when Ryoko was sitting in class, Ran happened to walk by. Ryoko was stunned by Ran's beauty and started making efforts to find out more about her. Eventually, she gathered information about Ran, and word of this reached Ran herself. Initially, Ran refused to go on a date with Ryoko, but when she noticed Lum repeatedly coming to her and talking about Ryoko, she started to reconsider. Lum was trying to explain that the person Ran thought was a boy was actually a girl, but Ran assumed that Lum was just making fun of her. Eventually, Ran decided to ignore Lum's words and agreed to go on a date with Ryoko. She approached Ryoko and made plans for the next day. The following day arrived, and Ryoko made up her mind to find out how Ran managed to maintain such a beautiful figure. During their date, as they were having dinner together, Ryoko began asking Ran about her beauty secrets. Just as Ran started explaining, Ataru showed up out of nowhere. He was there to spy on Ryoko. To make things worse, Lum arrived shortly after and once again tried to explain to Ran the truth about Ryoko, but Ran refused to listen and continue with the date. Ran and Ryoko then decided to go for a boat ride together. Meanwhile, Ataru and Lum were secretly watching them from another boat. When Ataru saw how close their hands were, he purposely steered his boat into theirs, causing their date to get disrupted. A little while later, although Lum and Ran were still arguing, Ryoko had already made up her mind. She decided that she would soon find a way to wear the dress she always wanted. The next day, Ryoko was seen counting some money that she had been saving over the past few days. However, the amount was still not enough for what she intended to purchase. Meanwhile, we see Shinobu walking to school, but she noticed that some people were following her. After a while, when her suspicion was confirmed, she quickly joined Ryoko, who was coming from the opposite direction. Now, Shinobu felt a bit safer with Ryoko around, and soon after, Ryoko shared her dilemma with Shinobu. She explained how she wanted to buy a bra for herself, but when she realized she didn't have enough money, she felt disheartened. Shinobu suggested that if Ryoko could get some more money, she could at least buy a standard. Ryoko liked the idea and was feeling happy about it, but at that moment, the strange men who were following Shinobu showed up. They saw Ryoko standing beside Shinobu and mistook her for a boy. One of the stalkers then revealed that their boss had fallen in love with Shinobu and had been obsessively taking her name all the time. However, the men suggested that if Ryoko and Shinobu pretended to be a couple, the boss would leave Shinobu alone. Initially, Ryoko was hesitant to agree, but when she learned that the men were willing to pay her for pretending, she immediately agreed to go along with the plan. A little while later, both Ryoko and Shinobu returned to class, where everyone got to know about their unusual arrangement. Meanwhile, Arata and Mendo were completely against the idea and were even ready to pretend to be Shinobu's boyfriend themselves. Arata soon found out that Ryoko was only doing all this to earn enough money to buy. After school, Ryoko and Shinobu started acting like a couple. Ryoko even considered kissing Shinobu just for the sake of it, but Shinobu stopped her. Right then, Arata arrived, holding a bra in his hand, and tried to explain to Ryoko that he could give her the bra if she wanted. There was no need for her to mess around with Shinobu. At that moment, the goons intervened and tried to prevent Arata from interfering. They threw him aside, and Ryoko had no choice but to continue the act with Shinobu. They were getting their photos taken together when the main boss, the one who liked Shinobu, showed up. The sight of him made it clear that he was the kind of guy who wouldn't hesitate to devour Shinobu. To calm him down, the goons quickly lied to their boss, saying the bra Arata was holding belonged to Shinobu. Hearing this, the boss immediately lunged at it. Seeing the money slipping out of her hands, Ryoko started chasing after it. But then she saw that fortune teller had taken the cash and tossed it into his roast, burning it. Furious, she turned her attention to the bra, but that too slipped out of her grasp. In the end, Ryoko's dream of wearing a new bra remained just a dream. Later on, we see Arata back at his house, where the weather outside looked pretty bad. A little while later, when the entire family was sitting together, a loud explosion shook their home, and a shooting star crashed straight into their living room. Seeing the state of their house, Arata's parents were really angry, but the star was trying to tell them that he could grant them 3 wishes. Initially, Arata and his family ignored him and instead scolded the star for destroying their home. The star then explained that if they wrote down their wish for fixing the house and gave it to him, he could make it come true. They did exactly that, and soon their entire house was restored to its original condition. Finally, the family realized that they now had something that could change their entire lives. They began preparing for their next wish, but just then, fortune teller showed up and ordered some food for himself, unintentionally wasting their second wish. A bit later, they started considering their third wish, but they needed some time to think it through. Meanwhile, Arata planned to sneak the star into his room to make a wish privately. However, his parents didn't like the idea since they suspected he might mess something up. So they decided to keep the star's stick with them to ensure that he couldn't grant any wishes even if he tried. Arata took the star to his room and tried every trick to get his wish granted, but none of his plans worked. Meanwhile, his parents continued discussing what they should ask for in their final wish. Seeing the discussion drag on, the star started getting really bored, so he decided to go to the kitchen for a drink. As soon as he opened the fridge, instead of finding water, he saw some, and without a second thought, drank it all. After some more discussions between Arata's parents, his father finally won the argument and decided that he wanted to relive his life from the beginning. This idea didn't sit well with both Arata and his mother, who started scolding the father for his selfish wish. Eventually, the father conceded and allowed the mother and son to choose the final wish. When they went searching for the star to tell him their wish, they were shocked to find him passed out from drinking. They needed to present their wish before sunrise for it to come true, so they quickly tried to wake him up. However, when the star refused to wake up, they accidentally wished for him to get up. The star took this as their last wish, woke up, and disappeared forever. Thus, despite all their efforts, the family ended up with nothing. The next day, Lum was busy creating something in her room. After some time, she managed to produce a special lipstick. She applied it to her lips and then went straight to Arata's house. There, Arata was already present, and Lum began flaunting her lips in front of him. For a moment, Arata was bewildered, but then Lum tried to apply the lipstick on his lips as well. Arata, sensing that something was off, managed to dodge her, but then Ten arrived just in time and got the lipstick applied on him. Lum immediately tried to kiss Ten, revealing her true intention. It turned out that the lipstick was designed to attract anyone else wearing the same lipstick, and Lum had created it solely to get a kiss. After learning the truth, Arata scolded Lum, telling her that making such things was wrong, and then threw the lipstick away. Little did Lum and Ten know that Arata had actually hidden the lipstick in his pocket. The following day, Arata took the lipstick to school and approached Ryoko. He knew that no matter what, she wouldn't refuse to try the lipstick. And that's exactly what happened. As soon as Ryoko applied the lipstick, she began to gravitate towards Arata. But before Arata could even try anything, she quickly turned the tables and taught him a lesson instead. After a while, Lum also showed up and was shocked to see how Arata had tricked her. Meanwhile, everyone had learned that the lipstick could be used to attract anyone else wearing it. Now, everyone was scrambling to get their hands on the lipstick. During the chaos, a few girls tried to forcibly apply the lipstick on Mendo. Once Mendo realized that if he wore the lipstick, he could kiss both Ryoko and Lum, he eagerly agreed to put it on. As the chaos ensued, even Ten and one of the teachers got caught up in it and ended up with lipstick on them. Eventually, things got completely out of control and Mendo and Arata found themselves in an awkward situation. Both had accidentally kissed each other. Somehow, the confusion finally came to an end. Afterward, a class meeting was organized and Arata announced that next week, there would be a food competition in their class. Each student would have to secretly add an ingredient to a pot in the dark, and everyone would have to eat the final dish. Right when the octopus was about to reach its climax, Lum used her electric shock powers and knocked it out completely. Afterward, Mendo felt sorry for his octopus, seeing the state it was in. Moved by Mendo's care and concern, the octopus got emotional and hugged him, bringing an end to the chaotic situation. A little later, we see Ten, who is starving, arriving at Arata's school in search of food. He set his eyes on Arata's lunch. To his surprise, he noticed a bright red item in Arata's lunchbox, which turned out to be a spicy pickle. When Ten tried to grab the pickle forcefully, Arata attempted to stop him, not wanting Ten to eat such a spicy food. But Ten ignored his warnings and gobbled up the pickle anyway. Strangely, after eating the pickle, Ten started acting completely drunk. When Lum noticed Ten's condition, she got angry at Arata. By this point, no one could figure out what had happened to Ten. After all, he hadn't consumed any. Now Lum became suspicious of the pickle, so she decided to eat it herself. Afterward, the same thing happened to her. She ended up completely drunk. In her intoxicated state, Lum took off her usual clothes and switched to a completely casual outfit, surprising everyone around. She got so drunk that she began forcing everyone to gather more pickles from their lunches to give her, just so she could get even more intoxicated. Meanwhile, Arata struggled to handle the situation because Ten was continuously bothering him with his fire attacks and Lum kept shocking him randomly. Finally, when Lum left, everyone blamed Arata for what happened and decided that he should go search for Ten while the others would look for Lum. As everyone was following Lum, she got upset because Arata wasn't the one searching for her. In her frustration, she attacked everyone with electric shocks. After a while, the class teacher also showed up and seeing Lum in a drunken state, he got angry at everyone, assuming they had something to do with it. But then Mendo stepped in and explained to the teacher that they were all innocent and hadn't done anything to cause her drunken state. When things started escalating, Mendo made a deal with the teacher, saying that if the teacher could gather any evidence against them, Mendo would dance naked as punishment. Hearing this, the teacher got extremely excited and eagerly began searching for evidence. Meanwhile, Arata was in a terrible state as Ten kept finding opportunities to attack him with fire. Eventually, Arata made his way over to Sakura. Just as Ten, still intoxicated, was about to attack her too, all the boys gathered around to shield Sakura. Sakura thought they were trying to protect her, but in reality, they were just using this as an excuse to get closer to her. After a while, Lum showed up, still in a completely drunken state. Arata needed to sober her up somehow, but he couldn't figure out how to do it. Just then, the fortune teller appeared and after understanding the situation, pulled out a special bottle. He knew that drinking the contents of this bottle would help Lum return to her normal self. So he somehow managed to get the bottle into Lum's hands, but instead of drinking it, she just started wandering around with it. In the midst of all this, the class teacher, who was still looking for evidence, spotted the bottle in Lum's hands. He quickly snatched it and went straight to Mendo, insisting that he should fulfill his earlier promise. In the end, Mendo didn't have to dance, but the day wrapped up with no resolution. Later, we see Benton on her home planet, making her way through a pink forest. Suddenly, she noticed a girl lying unconscious on the ground. Without wasting any time, Benton checked to see if she was breathing, but the girl was already dead. Before Benton could even process what had happened, she too suddenly lost consciousness and collapsed. After this, the seemingly dead girl suddenly gets up and starts tampering with Benton's chain. Meanwhile, Yukari, worried about Benton being missing for a whole day, starts asking Lum about her whereabouts. Lum, lost in her own thoughts, returns home only to be shocked when she finds Benton there. Now Lum tries to understand everything that happened, but before Benton could explain, she decides to leave again to search for the missing item. Confused, Lum asks her what she's looking for, and Benton reveals that it's her chain. The next moment, Benton and Lum head over to Yukari's place where Benton explains the entire story. When Benton regained consciousness earlier, she noticed that both the girl and her chain were missing. At this point, Yukari opens a box that a mysterious person had sent her. Inside the box, they find a CD, which they immediately play. On the TV, 3 girls appear. They were old friends and were the ones who had stolen Benton's chain. They did it to challenge Lum and her friends to a fight. Lum and the others start reminiscing about their childhood, recalling how they always stuck together and used to bully other kids to steal their lunches. But over time, the 3 girls drifted apart. Now Benton, determined to retrieve her chain, sets out alone to find it. Meanwhile, the 3 girls were troubled by the fact that they had issued a challenge, but didn't actually have the courage to fight. However, when they saw their special boat, they felt confident and prepared for the next step. They believed that with their robot's intelligence, they could win this challenge. On the other side, seeing Benton going alone made Lum and Yukari feel bad, so they decided to accompany her to confront the girls. Lum and the others initially thought that the girls would bring them to an open field for the fight, but they were wrong. The girls had arrived at a cafe instead. When Lum and her friends arrived, they noticed that the girls were more focused on eating than fighting. However, when Benton brought up the topic of the missing chain, the 3 girls immediately stood up and, holding the chain, declared that they were ready to take on Lum and her friends. After that, the 3 girls started running around the cafe with the chain. Whenever one of them was about to get caught, she used her special abilities to escape. This continued for a while, with the 3 darting here and there. Finally, after a lot of running, one of the girls got caught by Lum. But instead of recovering the chain, Lum accidentally breaks it and immediately realizes the huge mistake she's made. By the time she understands what she did, Benton arrives and starts questioning her about the situation. Lum, however, tries to hide her actions. Meanwhile, when the girls were about to lose all hope, their computer suddenly shows up one time. Seeing it, the girls' spirits lift, but they quickly notice that their robot isn't moving at all. It becomes clear that the robot's battery has probably died. During this time, Lum and the others were trapped beneath the robot, and Lum was worried that if she told Benton the truth, Benton might kidnap Ataru and take him away with her. Finally, the girls manage to find some oil and pour it into the robot, but they are shocked to realize that what they thought was engine oil was actually vegetable oil, causing the robot to malfunction and start vomiting a huge pile of chains. The robot then flies away, leaving the chains behind. Seeing all the chains scattered around, the girls think that Benton will never be able to find her original chain now. However, they were wrong because Benton immediately instructs Lum to use her electric shock on the pile of chains. Benton was confident that her genuine chain wouldn't be damaged by the shock. After that, Lum does exactly as instructed and burns all the chains. Following this, Yukari steps forward and freezes the girls, making it clear that they can't move. Benton then comes forward and finally finds her chain among the pile. Benton, along with Yukari and Lum, heads back home where we see why she was so worried about the chain. It turns out the chain was actually the key to her house, and without it, she couldn't enter. As they all step inside the house, they are surprised to see that the three girls are already sitting there waiting. When the girls try to challenge Benton again, this time she completely ignores them. Later, we see the three of them hanging out together in a cafe, seemingly trying to enjoy a good time. But Yukari had some troubling news that was about to ruin their mood. Yukari revealed that everything they did on Planet Urchin was about to come back to haunt them. As soon as the others heard the name of the planet, they understood she was talking about the robot C2. Robot C2 was actually their teacher when the three of them used to study together as kids. Whenever they misbehaved, the robot would always punish them and keep them in check. The girls didn't like this at all, so they teamed up and tried to teach C2 a lesson by dropping something heavy on him, but even that didn't damage him. As the girls continued talking about their past, Mendo and Ataru suddenly showed up and started listening to their story. During this, Ray mentioned how no matter what pranks she played on C2, it never seemed to cause him any harm. After that, we see another flashback where the three girls tried different ways to annoy the teacher, but all their attempts ended in failure. Eventually, they pushed the robot to the point where it had to escape and flee the planet. They took a spaceship and flew towards the Urchin planet. Because of their mischief, Robot C2 ended up getting stuck on that planet and remained there until Yukari received news of its return. After learning this, all three of them thought that Robot C2 would have forgotten about them by now, but they were wrong. The very next moment, Robot C2 suddenly appeared and attacked the girls. He seemed determined to get his revenge, and after the attack, quickly disappeared again. Sometime later, we see Mendo's sister, who, using her mischievous mind, created a doll that was no ordinary toy. It was a replica of Mendo himself. The catch was that whatever she did to the doll would have a direct effect on the real Mendo. When Mendo found out about this, he immediately told her to get rid of it, but his sister had a different plan in mind. After a while, Mendo's sister sent the doll to Ataru using one of her guards. The guard didn't explain anything to Ataru about the doll's unique powers. Ataru, oblivious to its nature, simply put the doll around his neck and headed to school. Mendo had no idea about the situation, but when strange things started happening to Ataru, he also began to experience them simultaneously. When Lum attacked Ataru with her thunder and Mendo felt the exact same effect, his suspicions were confirmed. He now knew for sure that Ataru had his doll. However, he also realized that Ataru was completely unaware of this. From then on, Mendo started protecting Ataru from every little mishap to avoid getting hurt himself. Finally, after witnessing Mendo's protective efforts, Ataru was moved to tears. But on the other hand, Mendo was exhausted from constantly saving Ataru, so he decided to ask for the doll back. Just then, some guards arrived and revealed everything about the doll to Ataru. After learning this, Ataru was overjoyed and immediately began using the doll to tease Mendo. The next day, Mendo also created a doll of Ataru, and soon, the two began using each other's dolls to cause mutual trouble. A few days later, we see Ten back on his home planet, when he came across a seller trying to sell him a bottle. In the end, Ten fell for the seller's words and bought the bottle, bringing it back to Lum. When he opened the bottle in front of Lum, he was shocked to see Lum immediately trapped inside it. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it wasn't just an ordinary bottle, but a vessel that could shrink people. Now stuck in the bottle, Lum ordered Ten to go back to the cellar and get a bottle that could reverse the effect and make her normal-sized again. Following her instructions, Ten rushed off to find that bottle. Meanwhile, when Ataru entered the room, he was shocked to see Lum in that condition. Lum, using her wits, told him that if he wanted to see her return to her normal size, he would have to shower her with love and affection. Ataru, though reluctant, had no choice but to comply, and Lum took full advantage of the situation. She made him feed her with his own hands, study with her, and even sleep beside her. The next day, Ataru left for school, but on his way he noticed Lum talking to a cat, telling about how Ten had gone to find a bigger bottle for her so she could return to normal. Hearing this, Ataru got furious and locked Lum inside a cage. After Ataru left, a bird attacked Lum and carried her away. On the other side, Ten learned from a man that the seller was planning to destroy all his items. This meant Ten had to reach the cellar as quickly as possible. Shortly after, Ten returned to Ataru and pleaded for his help. When Ataru and Ten arrived, they saw Lum fighting against the bird. Lum, realizing that Ataru was planning to put her back in the cage, tried to run away from him. With no other option left, Ataru explained everything and took Lum and Ten to the cellar. They arrived just in time, allowing Lum to return to her normal height. After that, we see Shinobu walking to school, but then she notices some dogs harassing a pet animal. She shoos the dogs away and rescues the animal, but she's shocked to find out that the pet was actually a fox. In the end, she hands the fox over to the police. However, the fox had developed a fondness for Shinobu, so the very next moment, it starts following her. When the fox saw Ataru talking to Shinobu, it thought that there was something going on between them. Later, the fox boss arrives and is about to pounce on Shinobu, but the fox decides to quickly injure the boss to win Shinobu's heart. However, Shinobu herself grabs the boss and throws him aside. After this, Shinobu returns to the classroom, where we see that the fox has now taken on Ataru's form. People start getting suspicious, but the fox insists that it is in fact Ataru. At this point, the teacher enters the room and even he finds it hard to believe that the fox is Ataru. But when the principal arrives and due to not wearing his glasses mistakes the fox for Ataru and starts praising him, everyone starts believing that it's really Ataru. After a while, Ataru also arrives and is shocked to see his imposter. The next moment he reveals the fox's true form, leaving everyone surprised. In the end, Shinobu realizes that the fox came there just for her, so she gently sends it back outside. However, shortly after it returns disguised as a teacher. Then all the students mistake it for their real teacher and start studying. Meanwhile, the actual teacher was tied up and hanging in the middle of the classroom. A little later, we see the principal, who was looking to select the strongest girl for the school, so he decided to test all the girls to find the most suitable one. Shortly afterward, all the girls in the class were gathered to check their hand strength using a machine. Each girl did the test and most of them passed. Meanwhile, Ran discreetly pretended to be injured and used a special device on her hand to manipulate the results. On the other hand, when it was Ryoko's turn, her father arrived and tried to stop her from participating. But when her father noticed the prize money, he changed his mind because he wanted to reopen his shop with that money. With this in mind, Ryoko also decided to participate in the test to prove herself as the strongest girl. In the end, 5 girls were selected to advance to the final round. However, Ataru announced that to choose the strongest among them, there would be a final competition. After some time, the school organizes a competition where the 5 girls have to fight each other. Ataru steps forward and reveals that this game will depend on both their intelligence and strength. The first competition begins where they have to guess what's inside a box. They all take turns, but this round benefits Ryoko because she had an idea of what could be inside. She chose a watermelon and won. Next, the second match starts, where the girls had to touch a candy placed on the stage. Again, Ryoko uses her wit and manages to touch the candy first. In the third match, the challenge was a food competition. This time, everyone got involved, but Yukari won because of her excellent eating skills. After these strong performances, it was time for the final match. For this round, all the girls had to prepare by wearing swimsuits. They all did as instructed, but during the ramp walk, Ryoko appeared fully clothed. When she finally took off her clothes, it turned out she was wearing boys' clothes underneath. It turns out that Ryoko's father had advised her to dress like a boy rather than a girl. After this, Ataru introduces them to their enemy, whom they will have to fight. Several animals appear and the girls prepare for their upcoming battle. It was clear that this fight wasn't going to be an ordinary one. First, Rain steps forward and begins kissing each of the girls to absorb their powers. After that, when the animals attack, the girls start teaching them a good lesson. Lum even manages to shock and throw the tiger aside, while on the other hand, Sakura gets trapped by a snake. Monkey tries to take advantage of the situation and attempts to kiss her. Sakura was in a tough spot and the audience was enjoying the spectacle, which resulted in her receiving high scores. A little while later, all the animals start overpowering the girls one by one, leaving everyone in shock. During this, Ryoko's father approaches her and explains that she needs to fight like a man. After saying this, he throws her onto the stage. Now Ryoko is ready to fight the animals, but they are still proving to be too strong. Ren can't stand to see this anymore, so she starts kissing everyone again to empower them. One by one, all the girls become stronger and start defeating the animals. But just as Ran was about to kiss Ryoko, she tries to run away. Her father stops her midway and Ran successfully kisses her, filling Ryoko with immense power. She then returns to the stage and single-handedly defeats all the animals. In the end, the girls win the fight, but Ataru declares all of them as winners. This seems strange since they were supposed to pick only one winner. The principal then comes onto the stage and reveals that after watching all their performances, he couldn't decide on a single winner, so he declared everyone a winner. After all this, Ryoko finds out that instead of a cash prize, the sponsor provided only his own products. This crushed Ryoko's hopes while all the animals were happily munching on the products. But Ataru benefited greatly from this since he had made a lot of money through a bet. At one point, he accidentally falls onto Lum, leading to an unintended kiss between them. Lum then asks him if he finally considers her his queen, but before he could respond, the other girls show up and start attacking him. And with that, my friends, this series comes to an end.